We'll start the Street and Trails and Utilities Commission meeting here on Monday, February the 1st. And roll call.
Chair Pollard.
Here.
Vice Chair Williams. Here. Commission members Schoen.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Walker. Here. All present.
Jerry, you want to do us the pleasure of the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So all discretionary actions before the Street, Trails, and Utilities Commissions are advisory in nature, and final actions will be confirmed, modified, or deleted by the City Council. And we'll go ahead with, did we have any public comments that were sent in? Or?
No comments.
Okay, we'll go ahead with the approval of the minutes. Any changes in the minutes?
I'll approve the minutes of, okay, what was the date? I'm confused. Monday, December 7th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Chair Pollard.
Yes.
Vice Chair Williams.
Yes.
Commission members Schoen.
Yes.
Thompson. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the discussion on the action items will be, I guess, first, Chad, by you, Trail Maintenance Program.
I turned it on. I really did.
Okay, so the two items we're going to discuss are as an update regarding two projects you're aware of. These were actually reviewed at the, one of them was reviewed specifically at the recent Measure R Commission as we requested funding to complete or to continue a project. So the first one I want to talk about on this is number A, which is the Trail Maintenance Program. As you're aware, for quite a while, the Stuck Commission did a lot of work in upgrading the trail maps, the trail master plan, and information, hopefully, in our actual trail standards, in hopes that someday we might have money and funding to start working on the trails. Well, lo and behold, thank goodness, Measure R came along, and so we got some funding. So we were right in line, ready to go to put our hand out, start asking for some money. As you're aware, the commission reviewed our ultimate proposal, which we tried to get as far as to do a 3-year project, with the first year rehabbing all the trails and the next 2 years doing some level of maintenance. Those options of maintenance was either to do which our standard is, which is basically just touching the trail once, grooming it, grading it, compacting it once, and then we're done. Nothing in between. Or the next level that was originally part of the proposal from our contractor was to do an ongoing monthly maintenance where you're out there each month working on the trails, any issues that are going on, and keeping the level of maintenance up all year long. And the desire of the Stuck Committee at the time was to recommend to the council that in future years beyond year 1 after the rehabilitation is to do monthly maintenance because it provides a better ongoing product. What we didn't have at the time is really, it was an estimate or guesstimate by the contractor and ourselves, really how much that second year, even first year, would cost us. We didn't know. We assumed based off of what we believed to be linear footage out in there and the trails, etc. So this is basically give you an estimate of what we actually thought we had, what we do have. Is that you, Mark? Yeah, 1 second. Oh, sorry. So this is meant to provide an update of where we stand as far as the current project, and that it's now finished. We've done the complete trail rehabilitation. And so our original budget, when we went through this process with the commission, and then we went to the Measure R Commission and ultimately the council, council ultimately decided they didn't want to do a 3-year agreement. They were a little hesitant on it, and they wanted to see how it turned out. They just want to do a 1 year and then bring back the remaining discussion on the 2 years of how it would be done and what the actual cost might be. So the original budget that we thought we needed, and the COC and council ultimately approved, was the original budget of $550,000, $500 for the actual work, and $50,000 for DG that the city would buy, so we control our costs on DG. And then ultimately, as we went through the project, and at the time, we thought our original footage was about 3.3 million square feet. Well, it turns out through the project, we had about 4.3 million, which is a good thing. It just shows we have more trail square footage than we thought we did. And now we have actual accurate numbers for every trail segment in the city versus it was a guess. So we've got that good data now. But because of that, we had to do even more work and pay more. So ultimately, we had to go back to council, ask for additional funding to pay off and complete the rest of the project, which council authorized. So the revised budget is now $650,000 for that first year rehabilitation. We pretty much have spent every penny to do the project. And it's now 100% done. But it also now leaves us into a desire, even though we're finished with the initial part, is we want to start getting back into actual maintenance, because that first year was just get through every single trail and bring it up to a minimum standard. Now we get to the actual keep it up, keep it looking nice so it doesn't quickly degrade to a below standard that we have to go back and fix again, with heavily costs. So we updated the numbers from the previous, from the contractor that did the work based off the new linear footages and square footage, excuse me, and got a new update from them, which I'll have in this part of this presentation. I'll review some of the information they provided. But basically what came out to is we wanted to start the O&M on the trails immediately, basically effective March 1st. And that's what we went to the Measure R Commission with, is additional funding for the rest of the fiscal year. Because Measure R funding is only allocated on a fiscal year basis, year to year. They don't do allocations for multiple years. Even though we'll do contracts for multiple years, we'll still go back as part of the process to always ask Measure R to once again fund this program every year. But we do and will do multi-year projects because we get a better deal with that. The assumption is if it's a program that council is very supportive of, which they are, it's not going to be something that's going to be turned off or on back and forth. It'd be very difficult to manage that kind of project, and our costs would go up. So what we estimated is for us, staff-wise, and based on what Measure the Stuck Committee said previously, is that there was a desire to do monthly maintenance. So that cost to do monthly maintenance was basically $43,000 a month for them to be out there. And that maintenance, and I'll describe what that maintenance will provide in the next couple of slides. So basically what we went back to Measure R is we want to fund from March through June. And that gets us through the fiscal year. And then we'll start 2 new full years of maintenance running through 2022 or 23 via the contract that we plan to take to council this week to authorize. So the initial funding that we asked for Measure R Group was just for the remainder of this fiscal year, transitioning to a maintenance contract now that we've rehabilitated the trails. And that cost is $43,107 a month. For the full year, it's $517,000 based off the square footage. So we did go to Measure R. They did approve continuing the program, support for continuing the program, and the funding that we requested. With that understanding is that next year's fiscal year, assuming council approves a multi-year agreement, we would come back as part of the regular budget cycle to reaffirm the funding for that next year's funding. And it would be the full amount, which would be this $517. And these prices are locked in for the full length of the contract. The contract does allow us to extend the contract for 2 additional years twice. Each time it's extended, then the contractor can ask for a adjustment to the wages based off of cost of living. And So, and that would be done at that time, at mutual agreement of the city and the contractor. So we're able to keep going and only see slight changes in the overall costs. Let me go through here. So this was excerpts of NOVAs, and this is the same thing I showed to the Measure R Commission. Just trying to highlight some of these photos here, kind of showing the before and after of what things look like. You know, you can see it. You should have the information in front of you. See a little bit better what some of the road conditions were. Adding DG, what it looked like, and how things got improved. We're removing grass or incompatible material or areas that get runoff. So they just highlighted a few of the pictures. And then they're highlighting again to keep happy trails. This is their philosophy. You know, we need to address runoff issues, keep things weed free, safety. You know, trimming plants that are encroaching into the trail. You know, obviously the maintenance and grades of that keeps for happy trails. So the first option, which again is not the option where we were recommending before by Stuck and staff, and not now, is basically touching it once. So basically, they go through what they basically did this year was go through the entire year, whether it takes them 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, they go through that process and we pay them basically per square foot. And that total cost to have them do it annually would be $424,000. And they would go through that, just do the bare minimum, which is identified in our standards that we created of going through and grooming the trails just once a year, and they never touch it again. If we ask them to go back, and there's cost on this later on, I can show you, there is a line item cost for every time they go back to do something under this scenario, we would pay additional costs for them to go back and redo, because maybe a trail gets wiped out by rain or some other issue, maybe erosion from a resident that's discharged something, and they have to go back and fix it or adjust it. They can do that, but it's going to be for additional costs. So this scenario is just for the bare minimum. And again, it just indicates that it's trail grading and removing any plants that encroach into the trail, which they basically did this time. They cut out grass and stuff like that.
Is this for trails throughout the city other than the LMBs?
Correct.
All the trails, not just the major ones.
Yeah, all the trails that are along public parkways. This does not include backyard trails.
Right.
So yes, it's everything except for LMD, and the only LMD that is done is LMD 1, because LMD 1 didn't include funding for trail maintenance. But LMD 2 through 5 are all funded through the LMDs, and they're maintained that way. So this is just for those areas. So the ongoing maintenance is obviously, well, we like this better is because it provides more level of service that they're going to provide. It's definitely more expensive. It's $517,000 for the year, but you're paying it monthly. You're not paying a square footage cost per month like they're in the example of number 1. You're going to pay per square foot that they actually complete until they're done. In this scenario, you're basically paying for a penny a square foot for them to be out there at all times doing anything we want them to do related to the trails, however many times we have to do it. So as a minimum, they will grade and groom every trail once a year no matter what. In addition to that, they will do other things that we have value. So it talks about here the trail. They're going to do that basic grooming and grading of the trail. They're going to do weed abatement, so make sure any types of weeds that are encroaching in the trail, they remove those. But they're also going to spray in the parkways. That's one of our key areas where we get a lot of issues is overgrown parkways. That even though it's technically per our municipal code, the residents are supposed to handle the parkways. It doesn't happen a lot, unfortunately, and we have to do either a lot of code enforcement to get it done, or we get our when they're available, our court crews or court labor or even CAL FIRE crews to go out and hack areas and remove all the weeds, etc. So in this case, they take that responsibility not only in the trail but in the parkway to help mitigate that. And they'll go as many times as necessary. It keeps growing 3 or 4 times because of rain. They'll go out and abate that. They can either do it by chemical or by physical pulling those weeds, by mechanical methods, or both. They may chemical kill it and initially let it die, and then they pull it with mechanical mechanisms. In addition to that, they will deal with encroaching plant material that comes in either from adjacent residents. We do get lawns creeping back into areas. We already removed grass. It's already coming back in some areas. Grass is very aggressive. So they'll be doing that as far as an ongoing maintenance. Plus they're doing drainage management. They'll actually be putting out sandbags as needed in these areas that we maintain, where we're getting a lot of erosion. So we have certain areas, not as much as the hills. We have sandbags everywhere. There are certainly some places in the lower areas, but especially on the east side, the west side, that do need some specific sandbagging to help mitigate the amount of erosion that occurs in certain areas. Well, part of this, it requires them to do the sandbagging we'll provide the sand like we do on the trail, but they will actually bag it, place it out there, and then eventually remove it once the storm is over with. Which is huge for us as far as labor. It helps preserve the trails better. They're doing it, not public works staff. So it's a great blessing for us, and especially on the weed abatement, that's a huge resource for us to be able to help not have that seen all the time, because it's one of the number one pet peeves for council is they hate seeing all the tall weeds everywhere, and they wonder what we're doing to try to do that. But we always default, well, it's the residents' responsibility to handle that. And in this case, then we can have the contractor go out there immediately and abate it and keep it abated and keep it down. So if they're out there 20 times because there happens to be continuous erosion or not runoff from, let's say, a house, and it's watering that area and it keeps growing back, they have to keep removing it. No matter how many times we tell them, they go out and do it. They're a resource that's there all year long, wherever we tell them to be. In addition, they have to continually go through the trail system and up and grade and groom every single trail. So within 12 months, it's done. And we always document that, like we did this first time around. They use our tablet system where they literally track every section of every trail as a work order. They take pictures as needed, showing before and after. My staff then reviews that and checks off, make sure it actually was done appropriately. If it wasn't, then we have a punch list that they go out and go fix. So and in the meantime, while they're doing that regular, if we see any issues, we call them up, say, hey, Nova, we need you to be over here, we need you to be over there, we need you to abate this, abate that, and they will record that information in our work order system to document what they did. They don't get any more money for it. They just get that fixed flat fee for being out there. So we will certainly be making sure that they're working and operating, doing a minimal level of service by making sure they're out there grooming the trails on a continuous basis. But there will be times, especially when it's rain, you're not going to do any grooming. You might be doing some other, usually during those times, they're doing the sandbagging and abatement. So they're working, but there may not be a quantity of work that you normally see each month because they're not doing as much of the trail. So there's going to be months where they're doing a ton of stuff, especially after the rains have stopped. They're really doing a lot because a lot of growth usually happens within 30 days after that, and they're going to be gangbusters out there because we'll be telling them where to go. Plus, hopefully, they're on their own recognizing where issues are and already abating them, not waiting for us to tell them. That's going to be part of our expected relationship in this type of contract. So we think all of this, the additional basically $10,000, $11,000 that you do from one version to the other, is a big benefit on a monthly basis. Yes, it's another $120,000 or so a year that you're adding in, but it's providing you a lot of physical labor to do a lot of abatement that otherwise you'd have to wait until crews are available that aren't going to take the same care in performing that. Because again, they're not, when you're talking about my court workers, they're not into aesthetics, they're hacking and they're making a mess. And versus when you have a proven and an accomplished landscaping company, they're going to make sure their work reflects their experience. And it's our job to make sure it does do that. So we felt there's a lot of benefit into this and are recommending to council just to continue to support what our original recommendation was. Ultimately, council could decide to do the one method. Ultimately, they could decide to not want to do anything and consider it another day. That is their choice, but we at least want to bring it back to them while it's hot. We got a lot of good positive feedback from the community during this project and appreciation for what was being done. Some folks that weren't excited about it, especially those folks where we were removing the incompatible material. But, for the most part, they understood. They were glad to see the city finally do something. They understood what we were doing and that we were hopefully, knock on wood, going to keep it up so it doesn't become a problem later. But overall, we had a really good positive feedback. People happy to see we were finally spending money to maintain our trails, and so that's a good thing. This is the schedule as we were speaking about before. So this is if the council chose option 1, which is to touch it once a year. If we wanted them to come out and do additional things like extra square footage, of areas need to be redone, and then, or adding, if they were going to have them add DG instead of us providing it, or they're going to do weed abatement, or adding sandbags, there's additional costs to do those. If you used option 1, we could use them as a resource to do this other work as an ongoing basis, as needed only. And then again, if we wanted to give specialized project to go clear a hill or a side area that might be overgrown, it's not part of the trail, they have costs in addition to what their hours of laborers are. We can use that, it's already set in there, plus the square footage cost. So we have the ability to do more beyond this, because we've actually used this contractor for other areas that are not related to a trail, just to do landscape maintenance and abatement. So, but this is mainly for really if you're doing phase 1. The only difference is, for example, the second bullet up there is if we wanted to add other areas of trail, we can add other trail square footage, maybe that wasn't done before. Maybe they decided to have one of the LMDs be added to our area. We can add that square footage, and they're giving it the same price as they're going to do the work now. And it makes it an easy facility, primarily for the benefit. Let's say if Parks wants to add them in as a vendor and use them in a certain area, price is already there, and Brian doesn't have to negotiate. So it helps out adding more square footage if we want to. Because we do have 2 different vendors providing service for about almost half of our city each, with Brightview doing up in the hills, up in the LMDs, and some other specific areas that we've asked them to maintain, some parkways, some medians that are in public areas. So this allows that same possibility. But ultimately, all that goes back to council anyway, if that's going to be approved. So they ultimately have that ability to do that. Back up here. So with that, is pretty much my conclusion as far as where we stand. Again, I think we had a very good 12 months. We learned a lot in those 12 months. Certainly the contractor learned a lot as far as learning Norco and our issues. He's got a lot of good ideas as far as already where the problem areas are for erosion. So we already know where to highlight and be looking at when it does, we have rain. That our goal would probably be able to create a map that highlights and targets all those areas already, so that we know, okay, rain's coming up next week. We want you to make sure you go out and sandbag that. We'll dump some dirt in the site that they want. They'll do their work on that. And then they'll put the sandbags out there and then remove them when we're done. And then most of them we're going to try to reclaim and put on pallets and store them till when we need them again. So, or depending on what the need is, if there's any erosion, they can always break the sandbags, dump them right there, because we're going to use DG. We're not going to use sand. That way the DG can go right into the trail. They can blend it into it, because that's some of the problems we've had in the past is we've been using sand, which doesn't compact. So in a lot of the areas that we've had problems, and this is a big issue up in the hills, where they use sand, you've got to remove a lot of sand just if you're going to try to compact and put DG in. Well, if we're already just putting DG in because that's what's in the bags, then it makes sense. So it's kind of trying to work smarter, not harder type of mentality in recognizing those issues, because one of their biggest complaints was, yes, we've been seeing a lot of sandbags that have deteriorated, but it's sand, and it doesn't help in their desire to groom and compact the trail. So they've had to remove that sand, haul it out, put it someplace else, and dump it at one of our facilities, and then we bring in new material. At least this way, we can put sand where we need it. It's already there, after the storm, and they don't have to bring new stuff in. They just have to open the sandbags and shovel it out or move it around, and then come back and compact it when it dries out. That's pretty much it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions you have.
I just have one question. Does the dump truck with the tractor for the demolition, does that include the dump fees to haul off?
That's a good question. For me, traditionally, if I'm having them do a project that's where I would use those fees, that would be something we discuss at that time, and to make sure what does this cover or not cover. Because sometimes we'll let them just dump it at our place because it makes it cheaper. Usually those fees don't include dumping. It's usually just the operator's time on the vehicle per hour. Usually that's a separate fee. They'll say, well, to us to dump it here or there, but if you can find it, it'll be this much, but if you can find a place where we can put it, then there's no charge. And commonly, depending on what the material is, we've got a couple locations where we can just keep dumping material.
Okay, I was just thinking of like dead grass or something like that you really don't want to hold on to.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, honestly, we have our Bluff site that takes everything. You know, we use it as our default area to dump material like grass, dirt, spoils. You know, that's our area because it's undeveloped, you know, for the most part. And when it gets developed, whether it's by us or somebody else, that'll all be remediated. So for while we can, it saved us money. We dump there, you know, for certain projects. But it really depends on the type of material we're going to be using, et cetera. Otherwise, if it's questionable, we don't know what its consistency is, then we say, no, just go ahead and dispose of it. And we understand there's a disposal fee.
Right. Other than that, I like the ongoing maintenance proposal. I think it covers everything for, you know, a few more cents per square foot. I think it's worth it. Then we don't, it's done.
Yeah. The first year will really tell us how well it stays looking. And I'm hoping, because again, if you drive now, you'll see plenty of trails that already look haggard. You know, they've got grass already growing into them, plants growing into them. And again, they were touched probably 12 months ago when they started the project. So we'll learn a lot in the first year if the council elects for this program of how much do we notice how well it's staying up, or do we still see that? And if we see that, then there's a problem here because they should be out there remediating. And again, a lot of this is on staff. As I've told council in the past, when it comes to our maintenance contracts, I know you can blame the contractor, but it's really staff who's supposed to keep the contractor accountable. And if we're not doing it, it's really our fault for not being on them, making them do what they're supposed to be doing. So, you know, my hope is, again, that we see an even better increased level after the first year. After the first year, we may say, you know, maybe we do just do it once a year, and that's enough. It just depends. I mean, so we're not stuck in anything, even in the agreement. It says in the contract, I don't think I mentioned this, that it does not guarantee them a year-to-year contract, even though it's there. We can cancel it at any time. We can adjust it at any time. So if we decide we want to do ongoing maintenance one year, this next year, and then the following they decide, you know, we just want to do one time. Council has every ability to decide each year what level of maintenance they want. So it doesn't, just because we sign a contract doesn't guarantee the contractor anything.
Well, I like the fact that we have an option.
Yes.
And I think with the ongoing, well, if they do it once a year, then like you said, there'll be 12 months sometimes in some areas.
Sherry, could I get you to use your microphone? That was one of the comments we had.
Yeah.
People, maybe it is.
I'll talk
I
loud.
saw the one behind you. Yeah, we had some comments that they couldn't hear what we were saying on our last meeting.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
So if we go with we can call them back as many times as we want, does that mean if like a resident puts in a repair order because the trail's eroded or whatever, that instead of the city coming out and dumping the DG and spreading it, that the contractor's now going to be responsible? And
Well, we would, anytime a resident comes through with a customer request, staff would always look at it first and determine what the actual issue is. And if it's something we need to abate immediately, we could, and maybe they're just calling, they want DG. We get a lot of requests from residents just for DG. And we can choose to bring it out to them and spread it for them, or we can have the contractor do it. It just depends if there's a true issue or not. Because I mean, a resident's impression of what needs maintenance might be different than ours, let's be honest. And it's not that they're wrong in their interpretation, it's just we know what we need to maintain right away versus what's an urgent issue. And so in some cases, we may simply say, yeah, contractor, go out and bait this area, or we just may do it ourselves, depending on what the issue is. But we literally could say, go out and do this one, do this one, do this one, do this one, do this one. Realistically, we're trying to point out, when it's a specific issue, or issues that of an area that's become overgrown because it got messed up, they're going to go out there and weed abate it and clean it up, et cetera. But yes, the short answer is yes. We could have them go deal with that specific trail issue if we wanted them to.
And I know in the past, we've discussed an educational program for the residents about them understanding that the code requires them to maintain it. Are we going to continue with that thought process also, so that
Yes.
we don't have the contractor coming back next year going, hey, this thing cost us a fortune, I mean.
Yeah, the council, last year, the council started a process where they had staff working together in finance, in planning, and in public works, sending out mailers that went out to the residents, explaining to them their responsibility. And the intent was to send that out twice a year and continue that sending out twice a year, reminding people that the parkway is their responsibility to maintain. The trail is even their responsibility to maintain in regards to eliminating weeds or debris. They don't maintain the trail physically, but they're supposed to maintain the weeds or move trash. So that education process is intended to continue because that was a directive of council. So yes, we do plan on continuing that messaging.
I don't have anything else.
So looking at the numbers, it looks like the difference from what was previously recommended to what staff has come up with was about 96,000, and that pretty much guarantees that they're going to cover basically everything, and they're going to ongoing maintenance. They're going to cover this every month,
Correct.
every day.
Right. Yeah, it's just a question of what's the value of really the landscape maintenance. That's what you're talking about, is them being out there dealing with every trail no matter how many times, and dealing with the issue of plants. My issue is really plants. The trails really don't fall apart that fast, other than specific areas because of really concentrated erosion, and we can handle those.
Yeah.
But it's really the weeds is what gets us everywhere. And to have somebody out there that's going to do weeds no matter how many times I tell them, for me, is a great resource that I don't have. I have to rely on court crews or CAL FIRE to go do spot things as it comes. We can do that. We can continue to do that. So maybe we choose to do the option one and continue to, where available, we'll fill in with court crews and whatnot, and continue to advocate and do citations and letters to residents, say, hey, you need to go take care of this, you need to take care of that. We can go that route. That's still an option, and still maintaining the trail once a year is still something, and I want to keep something going.
Sure.
So there's absolutely an option, but this is the reality of paying for them to be out there continuously as much as we want. This is, it's $90,000. It's not a little bit, but considering it's for 4 million square feet of trail area, that doesn't include the parkway. I mean, they're just automatically including the parkway areas, no matter how wide that is, into this.
Right.
That square footage is just the trail. So we're getting a lot of value out of it, in my opinion. Again, what comes to what we'll have to decide is, aesthetically, did we see a difference that we felt was worth the funds?
Right. What is the chance going forward that this could include backyard trails and getting those up to
It's
snuff?
always a possibility. I mean, obviously, that's something we've already talked about before, and I recognize that it's a ordinance requirement that the residents have to maintain it. But there's always been a lot of talk of maybe that is eventually maintained by the city. The biggest issue with that, which we've spoken about before, is there's an awful lot of encroachments that make maintenance of that backyard trail a real problem for anybody, whether it's a city or a contractor. And are we going to deal with that issue if we're going to go that route? Because I could see the wisdom of doing that. I mean, again, most residents don't have the ability to maintain it the way they should.
Mm-hmm.
Some have done it, and they've done a very good job at it.
Mm-hmm.
But others, they just have no interest in it, or can't do it, or whatever it might be. So that certainly is a discussion we can get involved in. But I think when we get involved with that, we have to make sure we're going to have a commitment to fix the issues that exist today, because there's an awful lot of encroachments in those backyard trails that we need to get rid of in order to functionally, because our costs are not going to be the same because if anybody has to do hand crews through there to go zigzagging in and out, that price per square foot is not going to be what it is.
Right.
So if we want to maintain that, we might spend an initial money. And again, I'm not opposed to the city spending the money to move those impediments. Maybe that's our burden in order to do it the right way, because it will take a lot of effort to get the residents to move their fences, to move their sheds and everything else. But if we can, look at that potential funding to help, there's some limitations. Like if we need to move a fence, move a fence. But if you've got your shed in the way, you got to move your shed, then we'll move the fence or whatever. I don't know. Like I said, we have to look at every single trail and figure out what every scenario is. So before we get into the discussion of can we add it in there, which you definitely could, and I think they would be willing to give us the same price at that, because we did talk about backyard trails, but they said, look, we've seen them. You need to do what we did this year, which is a complete rehab, and then we'll look at it and then figure out, but if I've got to basically have hand crews, that cost is not going to be that cost. He's happy to do it, but it's not going to be the same. And that can be a choice for council. They may decide, you know what, we'll pay the hand crew price, as long as it eliminates the issue of people complaining of how they don't look aesthetically pleasing and some of them are impassable. We don't care, because we just want them to be usable, because that's what they were for, especially for folks. They don't have a frontage trail. That was intended for their trail access in and out of their property, because they don't have frontage trails, but they can't use them because the neighbors next to them aren't maintaining them. So definitely think that's a possibility. It's just, it's definitely a bigger conversation, because there's a lot to be done there, but it's a conversation worth having.
And it sounds like your intent going forward is that Measure R funds are going to, hopefully, if they approve this.
To me, the Measure R was passed for this purpose, is to maintain the Norco lifestyle, which is its trails.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that you could point out that our Measure R money should be used for ongoing, it would be trails.
Sure.
But that's just my opinion. But going through that process, it was streets and into trails and public safety.
Sure.
So and obviously replacing some of our dilapidated buildings and stuff. So that's my hope and my thought. And what I've told the Measure R Commission is that this is the reality. This is the true cost to maintain our lifestyle. If we care and want to promote our trails, because that's who Norco is, this is the true cost. It's not $25,000 that I've been budgeted forever. This is the true cost. Are we willing to put our money where our mouth is, because we care about our trails? But this is the true cost. Whether it's Measure R money, whether it's general fund money, to me, a likely and positive source to be able to show the community every year where the money is going is dedicated to the trails every year. You will see stuff every year that shows you your money is being used in a positive manner. But ultimately, that's a decision for council to decide where they want to go. But this really tells you, because until now, we never knew what the cost truly was going to be.
Sure.
Now we know. And keep in mind, there's still a third of the city is being done and paid for by other residents through their LMDs that, if the true cost is even larger than this. It's probably closer to $1 million if you were to do everything under one contract.
Yeah.
But that's what Norco is. We are proud of our trails, and we're now putting in the money to maintain them, and this is what it'll cost every year to do it. So I think it's a very positive thing to do, but it's ultimately council's decision.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's moving along. Like everybody's on board, Measure R committee. Have to make a motion that we like this.
No, I don't need a motion, because this was already approved by the... Yeah, this is just information, because you guys already approved this before. And it's bringing the update of now we have true costs and true information to give you an update of where we're at. And again, if you like, you can generally just indicate, if you want to as a group, to say, yeah, we continue our support for this project and for this, for which option you like. And if council asked me on Wednesday, I could say yes. No, we did review this with the Stuck Committee again and gave them an update, and they reaffirmed their support for this program and liked option 2. So it's fine. You can make a voluntary motion that you should still support this. I don't think it's a bad thing.
I had a question on the sandbags. They're $3 a bag to place them and $3 to remove them.
No, it's for putting them in and taking them out, because it says sandbag replacement and removal. So they pay to put them out and remove them.
But like you said, we might not have, if they just dump the DG there.
Correct. But again, that's only relevant under option 1. Option 2, they do sandbags, there's no additional cost. That's just for option 1. Those are extra costs related to option 1, which is just touching the trails once. Under option 2, they're putting sandbags out all year long as we need them, no matter what, and removing them at the same flat fee cost.
Any more questions? Okay, do we have a motion to, we don't have to do that, do we?
It's up to you. Like I said, this is really information. If you'd like to make a motion, just so that if you have any, it's really whatever you choose to do. If you want to make a motion affirming your support for the project, for a particular option, I'm sure it's fine. I mean, honestly, it just reaffirms your support. That's not a bad thing.
Well, I'll make a motion then that we continue as a commission to support this and support option 2. I think the option 2 is a better financially, better deal for the city.
I think especially at this time too, we're still getting into getting these trails up to snuff kind of. And then Commissioner Mike Williams brings up a good thing about the backyard trails that maybe will come in the future, because I know that's a challenge right there, to say the least.
Definitely.
I'll second that motion of Commissioner Shones.
So are we,
I have a motion and a second. Chair Pollard,
yes.
Vice Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commission Members Schoen,
Yes.
Thompson, Walker,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, so we'll go to the next item.
Thank you for that, Chad.
Oh, my pleasure. Like I said, I'm excited to see our program continue.
Pretty good.
So the tree planting program, as you know, we've been working on that for the last year and a half. Done a lot of progress up in the last couple months. We did get some RFPs and from 3 vendors. Ultimately, at this point, we've selected WCA as the best proposal and vendor to plant the trees that we're looking to do. Again, this was a slide information that we took to the Measure Our Commission. This is intended to be part of a mid-year budget item. This isn't going to council this week. This is part of a different, this will probably go on the next council meeting in February. As an overall mid-year budget, we're adding a couple different projects. This will be one of them. We're asking council to fund, but we wanted to get approval from Measure R in their support of this. One of the issues we had, as you may remember, is we really didn't know how much this was going to cost us. We just knew we wanted to plant 1,200 trees. We asked for a grant. We got some money, but we didn't know if the grant would cover it. We got information from experts. We had our TAC committee here that talked about issues, took that information, developed an RFP, got those proposals back. WCA had the best one, we thought, to provide those services, got their costs for those services, and then we based off of that, we determined we don't have enough money. And we did ask the question to CAL FIRE, who gave us the grant, is could we plant less trees that just matches the amount of money we got? They said no. You applied for a grant to plant 1,200 trees. We gave you the money accordingly. If it costs you more, you need to figure it out or give the grant money back. Certainly not planning to do that, because it was council's directive, because of the fact we've been removing so many poorly maintained trees, us and Edison, through different areas. We've seen a lot of trees removed. They absolutely want to make sure we're getting some sort of program back up to at least plant some trees. These are all going to be small trees. They're going to be 15-gallon trees. They're not going to come back and be 15-foot trees from the beginning. This is what the grant requires, but it's starting somewhere. These trees will grow. They will, mature in the future, hopefully most of them. Some of them may not make it, the long haul. Our biggest issue that we dealt with, and we talked about before, is trying to figure out how do we maintain them? Because we didn't get a lot of residents that were interested in the trees, that were willing to have dedicated irrigation. We only got like 200 people interested, and I got 1,200 trees. I know parks will take some of them, but they're not going to take 1,000 of them. So how do we put them in the parkways and make sure they maintain? So we ultimately decided to at least do a 1-year watering program. That was pretty consistent from our TAC group. So we said, okay, let's make it a requirement in the RFP that they have to maintain and water the tree for 12 months. They decide how often they have to go out, and at the end of 12 months, we go and look at every tree to ascertain if they're healthy or not. And then we'll accept that tree and it's done. The unknown we don't know about is whether or not the tree will survive on its own after that. We hope that because it's a small tree, that over that year, it trains itself as it grows its roots out, how to find water that might be adjacent to that area to hopefully survive. There is no grand plan after 12 months. Some of these residents where we're going to plant it will have irrigation, and it won't be an issue. Some residents, maybe after it's done, they decide to put irrigation after the fact on their own, but they never indicated to us they were going to do it. So what we did was open it up again for residents, and you might have seen the advertisements out there if you want a tree, basically indicating there is no requirement to water at this point. We reached out to those folks that originally said they wanted it, wanted to reaffirm that they did want a tree, they had irrigation, and we gave them a copy of the trees and said, which ones do you want? Pick 2. And we'll look at it, and so we can start creating an inventory of the trees that might be needed. And because ultimately, even though they pick a tree or trees, that tree may not go in that place. Ultimately, the contractor is going to decide, based off of going out there and actually seeing the soil and everything else, that tree may not be best for that soil, that environment, that direct sun, whatever it might be. And they'll pick from the same list one they think is best. But we at least want to try to give the option to the residents. And we'll talk to the residents. If it turns out we can't plant that tree, we'll explain why. Because we just want to make sure this is done the best way possible to give us the best chance. So we're getting more people interested in and have signed up for a tree, even though they aren't committing to doing watering. We basically said for everybody, we'll provide water. And obviously for those folks, when we go out and plant a tree, if it turns out that they have dedicated irrigation, we're going to label that tree as not needing irrigation. Watering is part of the monthly maintenance. Because if I go to the next slide, so this kind of explains what we're doing and what we needed and why. So we're planning to purchase 1,200 trees, and each of the trees, no matter what tree it is, W says they'll be $50. So that made it real easy for us. And to plant every tree, it's going to be $200. So it makes it very generic, very easy for us. The issue becomes with watering and figuring out which trees need water and which ones don't. A huge cost difference in a tree that has to be watered. They have to go out every month, maybe a couple times a month, a couple times a week, depending on the time of year, to take their water truck and they're going to water that tree and all these trees for that first 12 months. And that's up to them to figure out. We're going to provide the water, but they're going to have to go to every location. It'll be all mapped out once everything gets planted, so we can go around and verify that, hey, you know what, they said they watered, let me go check. Yep, it's wet. They were out there. So we'll be spot checking them. So if they just have to go out and maintain it once a month, they check the tree, make sure the stakes are there, do any minor pruning that needs to be done. If they have to replace anything that's might have been damaged as far as a planter well or anything like that, they'll look at that, go out at least look at it once a month, every tree. So it's $50. So we had to come up with a guesstimate of how many trees would need water, how many would not. So we came up with 400 trees that probably wouldn't need water. And ultimately we came up with the budget, recognizing if that was the assumption, we'd need a total of $640,000. Well, we only got a grant of $242. So I needed to make up that difference. So we needed $397,000. Originally our match was $81,000, but this is the true number we need. Obviously, if it turns out we plant more trees that don't need watering, then our costs will go down. That tree flips over to a non-watering maintenance schedule, and we'll actually spend less. But the last thing we wanted to do is underestimate and end up having to go back to ask for more money. So we think this is a reasonable scenario. I do think we're going to end up having more trees that don't need watering. I can't say specifically, but I think 400 is reasonable between some of the residents that have already participated, where parks could put trees all over the place. I think the numbers will grow. So that I think that we'll end up spending less of our money. But this is a reasonable budget. So what we had done is went to Measure R and talked about the program because we'd spoken about it before. Now that we had the specifics, we want to come back to them and actually make it a project. So for our request to them, this is defining it and making it an actual project that we will take to council at mid-year, which is going to be the second meeting in February, asking council to accept this as another project that they're waiting on. They know about it, and to approve that one-time funding source of the $397,000 from Measure R to plant those 1,200 trees. And then with the goal of, if council approves that, the same night they'll approve the contract, the WCA, and then I can get a WCA started beginning of March. We'll get together and we'll talk about the existing customers, what list of trees they picked. We'll start mapping out locations, talking with parks about where they can place trees, and then the remainder that are left over that nobody has accounted for, we're going to go out and find places for those trees where they have the best chance to survive. We're going to try to hit a lot of the areas where trees were removed. Obviously, if trees survived there before, they probably could survive again, but you never know. Those trees are 50 years old. So different conditions 50 years ago when they got established than now. We're a lot different. So, but we're going to try to do the best thing possible. We're going to look at 6th Street, see if we can do any trees there. Since we lost some areas, we're going to look at maybe some on Hamner in certain areas where there's parkways. We're going to try to spread them around as much as we can. Brian has indicated he's got needs some in the LMDs because he's had a lot of trees die off in those areas. Depending on timing, we might use some of those trees for the new trail on River Road. It just depends on timing. That one project's going to be a little bit different now that council's changed it. I don't know if I've updated you guys on that change yet, but they want it to be different. I think at the last meeting we talked about it, but I'm now going to get that all engineered. It's going to be out in bid. So depending on when that gets done, because I'm hoping to finish this tree project by the end of June. Get them all planted, done, and start the 12-month clock of maintenance. So depending on when we do it, and that project starts, we might just reserve a certain number of trees off to the side, and knowing they're going to be planted, probably what we're going to do, or we'll just make planting some trees as part of the project. We also have it in here anyway if we want to purchase more. Those are $50 a piece. I got a price. I can get it from WCA. If I end up needing 40 of them going down that whole stretch, I know what the cost would be. So that's where we are at this point. We're trying to get that kicked off. I have an aggressive schedule. I'm hoping that we can make a lot of progress by June, if not complete it. The initial getting everything planted. I know WCA wants to get the full list and try to plant everything in bundles, big bundles, so they're not doing onesie-twosie stuff because it just costs them more. So I think with their cooperation and them going out and say, hey, you tell me where these should go. You see areas that trees might survive if you're watering from a year, let's plant them there. And again, I would hope people aren't going to be upset if we plant a tree in front of their home. I'm not going around to ask people if they want a tree in front of their house because that's just a debate. And it's a public parkway. It's for beautification. I have to maintain the tree. It doesn't impact the resident at all. They don't have to water it. So when we take the chance to see it survives. Our goal is just to spread as many trees out there as we can. So, because if I have to go talk to every resident, it will slow this thing down tremendously. So that's my intent, is to try to plant them in those areas. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions you have regarding this project.
I think you had mentioned before that there was a timeline.
Yes, the grant is a 3-year grant, so we basically have 2 years left.
Okay.
Or year and a half, or a little more than a year and a half.
Okay.
So this is specifically the 800 trees, $400 a piece. That's just a high-end estimate that they'll, if need be, they'll come along. And but you figure it's going to be about half of that number will actually need water?
I wouldn't say half. Again, it really depends. The areas that really have defined watering already is the LMDs, most of the LMDs, except for LMD2, water's off, or the parks. And it just depends on how many trees Brian needs in the parks. So if he can throw a couple hundred in there in different parks, and he can gobble up that number really fast. But my goal is really to put those trees out in the parkways, because the parks, we took out most of these trees along the streets. I want to put trees back along the streets. It's great in filling parks up, but I didn't take trees out of the parks. I took them out of everybody's front yard. So I'd like to try to put trees back,
Now, they don't provide any kind of warranty that the tree will root or anything like that, like a
A
lot of-
12-month warranty.
They do 12-month
Yeah, it's
warranty.
12 months,
okay.
so from the time it's planted, they're doing 12-month maintenance, and then once it's done, we accept it, and it's ours.
So if the tree dies within that 12 months, they'll replant it.
They'll replant it.
Okay.
And that's a common thing for WCA when they've done other projects for the city, small, tiny ones. They warranty everything for at least 12 months.
Yeah, a lot of nurseries do, so. I think that answered my questions.
I don't really have anything.
So the maintenance on the watering, what proposal do we have doing that? The city or
No, the contractor's doing that.
the contractor will determine the watering
Yeah,
amounts?
they have to maintain the tree in a healthy condition, so they
Okay.
determine how much watering has to be done.
Oh, I see.
And they do the watering.
And then, so we got to measure our contribution of $397,000. If any of that isn't used, does that go back to Measure R money?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
and any project that's Measure R where we don't use the money always goes back.
It's
to Measure R.
earmarked for that.
Yep.
I love it. And then I really got a couple of comments on Sherry's proposal for that trail. If you can take that into consideration,
The
that
linear trail
linear trail.
along Western Avenue.
Well, let's finish this discussion, and then we can talk about it under other
Okay.
items. I don't want to confuse the issues.
No, I mean, people are interested in this project.
So if, on this one, again, if you guys want to go ahead and do a motion of anything as far as indicating support and for the project and moving forward with it, that'd be great.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion for support for this project?
I'll make a motion that we support this project, the tree planting program.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Chair Pollard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Williams.
Yes?
Commission members Schoen,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, at this time, on number 4, commission, subcommittee, staff, any communications?
Nothing from staff. So you want to mention something about a linear trail?
I got Sherry's comment, people that watched us thought that linear trail tree locations would be an excellent place to put some trees.
I'm not sure what you mean by linear trail tree
He's
location.
more familiar with the location, so
It's-
I don't want to,
It's down by my neighborhood, so it's the dirt extension of Western Avenue that runs from Appaloosa to Fifth. It doesn't run, it actually takes a turn and goes by the
The
sports
one that goes
park.
along the Navy up to that portion?
Correct.
Okay.
So they have a huge encroachment, or what, not encroachment, but it's their property. I'm not sure how far it comes out to our trail, but
But the Navy has an encroachment?
well, their property line
Okay.
comes, it's an offset. I don't know what the distance is, but it comes
Right.
west, and it gets close to our trail. So I don't know how much room is there that's actually ours. There is a couple manholes in there.
Well, we have, I think sewer in there, we had reclaim in there, I think we have a water line in there. So we have a lot of utilities through there.
Yeah. But it would really make it look nice. And like I said, in the heat of the summer, there is no shade to speak of except for a couple palms, and they're
So you're talking about doing trees along that area?
correct.
Oh, okay, along that trail segment.
Right.
Oh, okay. No, I can certainly look at that as a possibility. It should be fine as far as location because it's in a public area. That was the only criteria, is it had to be a publicly accessible area. where we plant them. Like if somebody wanted to put it on the private property, we can't do that because that's private property.
Right.
Because I looked at that as an option, trying to use some trees up, but they said no, it has to be in a public area. So yeah, that would be an area that could be done as far as adding trees.
There's no water.
Yeah, and again, a lot of our areas may not have water, but again, if it gets runoff, even just from adjacent areas, it may have its own source of water.
And
So we just
everything
need to
else is
look at the area, look at the dirt, the soil, and something WCA is going to have to advise us, say, hey, look, does this make sense planting trees around here? Do you think, they have a good chance of surviving? And that's going to be along any area. That I'm going to rely on them as the experts to say, does this make sense or not? But we can certainly look at that as an area to try to focus some trees.
I just had one comment too, back on the education to the residents on the ROW, this flyer that came out. I just wondered if this was included in a new resident packet from the City Hall, or do we have something like that?
I think they have I forgot what they call it. They have a packet that they give in new residents. Usually it's involving trash, who's their caller, and this and that. And I think that may or may not be something as part of that. But I think they generally have something. Finance would have that information. I don't, as far as what they may give a new resident.
I know, because most of the issues I seem to find in our neighborhoods, or somebody new moves in, either they haven't been told, or they don't understand. Just our basic, code enforcement issues.
Yeah, most
So
people,
this would help. If it's not included, it should be.
right.
And anything else along those lines.
And that's why they're trying to at least mail it out twice a year through the utility bills. So if it's not something they get when they start up service, they're at least getting it in the mail.
Right.
Whether they round file it real quick or not, but at least we're trying to get information out.
Thank you. Chad, thank you for sending that email back to us on the Third and Hammer based on that conversation that we had about the traffic
Oh, yeah.
and turn lanes. Has there been any further information on who controls that section of Third as legal?
Information, I think as we discussed before.
You did have, and you said it was...
We control it. We don't have physical legal possession of it, but the city attorney's opinion is that we control it by the agreement that we signed. We just need to work with the school to physically get it, to turn it over to us. So it's legally in our name. But per our agreement, his opinion is we control the maintenance of the street and decision-making of it. That's something we're working on logistically with the school.
Yeah.
We'd started it with the past president, and then once he departed, it kind of messed things up. So now we're starting over again.
It was immediate, it seemed. And I know that this is going to planning next week, that project is. I had an idea that I discussed with another member, just, hey, what do you think about this? About the the street crossings right there at Third and Hamner. Do we need to agendize this, or can we hear it now?
Well, you can't have a discussion on any item
Okay.
Without it being agendized. And again, it depends on what the issue is. As far as, because remember, we'll bring items to you. We don't really create items for staff. So again, if you want to send me the information offline, I can look at it and review it with the city engineer and determine if it's something that is something he maybe already thought of, or is it required?
Okay.
And then we can bring you an update as far as if it's an element that could be considered by council.
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
I can tell you candidly, this project's got a long way to go. It's by no means a sure thing it's getting passed tomorrow, next week. So there probably is going to be a lot more discussion on it,
Sure.
in the future from all groups. Like I said, they've got some work to do.
I'll send you something and a sketch and
Yeah.
see what you think.
And then I
So-
get you some feedback on it as far
Sure.
as what, again, the city engineer and the traffic engineer, I rely on them to to review those issues and make recommendations to me, and then I relay that information to the commissions or planning commission, council, et cetera.
Sure.
So,
All right.
Yep.
You might remember over a couple of meetings, I asked you about those guardrails over the freeway crossings, 4th Street, 5th Street, and Detroit.
the concrete ones?
Yes. Have staff had a chance to take a look at those covers on those guardrails and make a determination what they want to do with them?
Covers? I'm sorry, I guess I don't remember that part. I remember talking about that, but there's covers on the guardrails?
The wood that's all connected to those guardrails.
You're talking about trail fencing?
No.
They're actually
Where the
guardrails.
K-rail divider is between the horse trail that goes over the freeway and the street. At the ends of both of those, again, there's a guardrail. Okay, and what they did is they put like 2 by 12 planks
Okay.
over these things, and they look like they've been there as long as the bridge has been there. And they're starting to splinter off, they're warping, they're falling off, there's holes, and
It's not
it
the-
could, right, exactly right.
On the road surface?
No, it's on top of the guardrail.
No, I'll have to go look at it because that's not
Yeah.
clicking for me as
Okay,
far as what
yeah,
that
but-
looks like.
Guardrail post,
Uh-huh.
and they set a plank on it.
Just on top.
Yep,
Okay.
Yeah, it's unusual.
pretty much. But
Not
I went out,
Also depend on that, if that's
the question was
Caltrans
Caltrans.
right away, that's their infrastructure.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'll have to look at that. Sorry, I guess I didn't realize that's what we were talking about that one time, so, but at least I have a better idea now.
Of course you know this stuff.
yeah, you would. I mean, come on. And then the only other thing I've got is I understand that there is a sewer project going to be coming down 4th Street in the near future.
No. There's a storm drain project.
Storm drain,
Yeah,
okay,
but not a sewer project.
okay. What's your timeline on that
I
project?
don't
Do you
know. It's in design right now, so it's probably a couple years out before it actually
Really?
gets constructed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
according to
the design is not small. It'll take a little while.
the only reason I ask is I'm on 4th, so I have a feeling it's going to be right like in front of my house.
Want to be impacted now or later? What are you saying?
No impacts there.
Okay.
No, I was asking. I was, because I'll let my neighbors know.
We're just getting into the
and I've
design,
got,
so
you know,
the design will probably take 8 to 10 months at least.
Sure.
And then we'll go into construction.
Sure.
With the intent is once the storm drain is in, we'll also probably pair it, if the money's there, with a street paving project. So we'll repave it. So we want to get it, once we do the utilities we know we need to do, we really try to pave the roads. Like I said, that's one of the reasons why I probably would have paved 4th Street or even 5th Street along those same stretches already, but I have infrastructure that I plan to go in, and I'm purposely waiting until that goes in, and then I can pave those roads.
Is the Valley View project for the same kind of between 3rd and 4th, is that that was supposed to take off?
Under design, unfortunately, it's taken longer than it should,
Yeah.
Sam.
I'm just asking. I knew I got
just got
word that
Sam
it was
in
going to
trouble
happen, and that. So I mean, I'm not hammering on anybody. I'm just curious about.
Yeah, it's just taken a while because
I talked to neighbors and stuff and let them know, hey, this is going to be happening. So just
yeah. Once
know,
it's done, it'll
be
be
ready for it.
It'll
They
be a
don't-
very good project, but
I get
it's-
irritated when they come and they say, I didn't know anything about this. Well,
Look on the
do a little
website.
bit of research.
we got a lot of information on the website.
Well, that's the way I see it too.
Lists every
It
project
is.
on there and where it goes,
That
mapped
website's got a
out.
lot to offer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, I had a couple things. The irrigation water from Rite 8 on 6th Street in Valley View is flooding the trails. Is that code enforcement that needs to be advised of that, or?
They have been. We've been trying to, it's a corporate company. They're a pain in the butt to get to, fix the irrigation because it's the folks that are there don't really deal with the maintenance contracts. So they're passing our information along. So, but we're aware of it. It's a problem.
It's a safety issue too with riders. Some horses don't like puddles.
We get a lot of those. So, yeah. Get them used to it.
And then an update on the fencing projects that we're doing in the city. How are we doing on that? The ones we approved for last year, is that?
We just started it. We finished almost all of Corona between Second and First. There's some segments in there we didn't do because there's some encroachments that we have to get rid of first. We're working on that right now. And then we can finish off that one. And then right now they've been on hold because of the rain. So they'll hopefully be starting up sometime, I think, next week.
Now, are we going to have a date where you're going to maybe ask us for streets that we think trails or fencing ought to go in for next year?
Yeah, when we get to the budget time, we'll bring it forward. I would probably say in April,
In April?
somewhere around there.
Okay. And so with the street maintenance, the trail maintenance that we've been doing this last year, we came into problems with paved driveways of sorts with asphalt or where they came across the trail. You indicated at one time that the city was going to address those residents about taking that out. Is there anything going on with that?
No, I mean, the issue with the paved driveways is we'd have to, again, it's a longer term issue because we have to go through and verify at that property, did they ever have an encroachment permit that was ever provided by anybody? Because we've had that found out that, and I had an encroachment permit, sure enough, they did. I don't know who authorized it, but they sure did. So I can't take it away from them because it was authorized. So part of that is, and it has to do with any encroachments in the trail, we're trying to document what they are, whether it's somebody's property wall or their grass or their trees or there's all kinds of things that have impacted the trails. And then taking them back to council at one point and saying, okay, here's our problem. Will you give us your support and your energy to allow us to go out and actually do code enforcement, work with the residents, not cite them first, tell them what the issue is. Fortunately, you do need to remove it. We'll work with you on time. And folks who don't want to cooperate, then we go through a citation process. And if we need to, we have a process where we financially remove them ourselves, and then we can either do it ourselves and we just pay for it and move on, or we can maybe assess it to the property as part of a lien for failure to remove it. I don't know. That's a much bigger political discussion. But we're definitely not removing anything because of the political pushback that sometimes happens. If we're going to go that route, it's one thing for us to remove the incompatible media. That's an easy one to defend. I'd never had any council person, even though they got a call, not think that was the right thing to do. However, when you're now getting into the permanent infrastructure that's been put there, whether it's appropriate or not, or should have been put there, that is a much bigger political discussion where I'm not going to go in and start tearing things out. Again, driveways are easy for me to tear out, remove that thing, put new DG in, and move on. That's not a big, costly thing. It's when you're getting into removing somebody's grass, their irrigation system, their trees that they've had there. There's a lot more of an emotional tie to it, but believe me, people will fight for their concrete driveway. They want it. But it gets into bigger discussion, which is something I think would help people, and I know it's talked about before, I think Mr. Williams mentioned it before to council, is that pavers is what everybody wants. That would solve a lot of headaches for a lot of folks, is if we would remove that moratorium and allow people to put pavers in their driveways. Because the number one complaint from all of them is they're just tired of bringing the DG into their driveway, into their garage, and they're sweeping it all the time. So that's the one thing I think if we were to revisit, that would be an alternate that people with driveways would jump on to put in a paved driveway with pavers, would be that. I know a lot of people would jump on it very quickly before it was removed again. If that was, so that's really, to me, another bigger discussion is looking at that, whether it's that or a rubberized asphalt as an alternative surface. Maybe that's a compromise. I don't know if that's more slippery or less slippery than regular asphalt.
They have the rubberized pavers also.
Even again, all the type of things. So, but again, that discussion is really going to start here. If we want to have that discussion, that's certainly something I think is well worth agendizing and having it, because I think there's a big outcry for it. And again, that decision was made many years ago. And it was made by a minority of people. So it doesn't hurt to have the discussion and decide, as long as we can plan it, figure out where we do it, where you can't do it, because there are concerns if you allow that in the hills on a certain grade or slope, maybe that's not the best thing to have. And we can create that scenario where, I'm sorry, unfortunately, if you have this grade of your driveway, you can't use it, I'm sorry. And we can create that requirement. Again, it does create a haves and have-nots, which I'm not a big fan of, but at least as a way to maybe allow the majority of folks to have it. So if you've got a steep driveway, maybe the pavers aren't a good thing. Maybe it is slippery, unless it is a rubberized paver or this or that. I don't know. But that's something we can look at, investigate, bring information to you guys and say, hey, look, here's the information about it. Here's places that use it. Here's what they say about it. We can go through that process again. They went through the whole process, eventually taking pavers out. We can always bring it back again as a discussion if you guys want to. And I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. But it's not going to be an easy one, because there's still some folks that are adamantly against them. So you just got to be a louder voice if that's really what you want.
So I say let's agendize that. Ask for a lift on a moratorium and reopen the discussion of the pavers.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
So keep in mind, like I said, what you can do is ask for direction from me. Because again, the commission doesn't agendize things for staff, but I think that the request is to staff to bring it back as a discussion. Again, I think it's a good one to have.
I request that.
There's a lot of feedback from folks that want that, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. It'll take me some time, because I want to make sure I get all the facts of what happened before, why it got pushed away, what were the issues of why, there, and then so I can bring back and say, is it relative to value, and plus bring back multiple options if there are any, of how it can be done.
It's a safety issue too.
Yeah.
If the horse slips or grandma slips in the driveway, garage.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And as a commission, it would give us the opportunity to do our homework. And you guys are going to do yours, we're going to do ours and help you, you're going to help us. We're going to try and come to a happy medium.
Right.
Maybe.
Like I said, give me a little while. Like I said, I've got a lot of other things on my plate. Like I said, I'm trying to get the current things we're trying to deal with, like these tonight, out and done and moved on. And then I can take on this, because once we get the ongoing maintenance done, well, now I get into these other projects like this and focus more on those and have staff working on and pull information. Again, if you also pull your information, I would encourage you to send it to me, because you might find something and say, hey, here's this place that uses this, here's this place that uses that. If we can give council other alternatives, I'm sure they want to hear other alternatives. We just haven't discussed this in quite a long time. Certainly, because the issue of pavers was stopped before I came here, so that's over 5 years ago. So I think it's a prime opportunity to talk about it again and what we're doing. No, you're just basically. I'm okay with the direction, understand it, and I'll just bring it back as a discussion item. Oh, they do. Any other questions, Jim?
An updated list of the next trails that are on the project list?
On the current project list,
Well, let's see, yes,
or the ones we're planning for next budget year?
next budget year.
Oh, yeah, that'll be brought back probably in April. We'll do it during the budget cycle.
Okay.
So we'll have a meeting before we do the budget with the council, and before I go to Measure R, because we'll request that money from Measure R. So it'll go to Stuck first, and then Measure R, and then the council as far as budget process. So we'll probably bring it back.
Well, maybe
Ben?
I misspoke. Maybe I'm looking for the current list then, because the only one I have is these, and they've been completed,
Okay.
as far as I know.
Yeah, it's the current list that you guys have already approved and council authorized. They've started on it, but the only street they've almost finished is Corona Avenue. And that's between 2nd Street and 1st Street.
Okay. And that's on this list.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the entire list is getting done that we created, which is pretty long. It's our biggest project so far. And we authorized $500,000 for that, but it only cost us, I think it was $370. So we got a great, deal on it as far as pricing. So it was great to see everything get done. So we'll bring an updated list of the future projects And again, feel free if you want to send me areas that you think we should do ahead of time before I create a list. I'll just keep that information and keep it in mind as far as locations. And then when I compile my list of areas I think are appropriate, then I'll already have some of the ones you've already been thinking of. So don't be shy about sending me stuff and saying, hey, here's some of the streets I think we should focus on the next year. And then if there's some of them we're not going to do, I don't have on that list, I'll explain to you why. Because I might have a project there, I might be doing something, and I don't want to put anything there because I'm going to put a storm drain through it, and that's where the trail, and it's going through the trail. So don't want to put fencing in. So, but I'll let you know. But yeah, just let me know. And again, I'm hoping that, again, Measure R, improving the trails, we'll get more Measure R money for that year after year. Keep putting trail fencing in, keep doing the trail maintenance. So already right now, we've got $1 million potentially committed for maintaining our trails every year. Half of it's for putting new trail fencing, the other half's for maintaining the trails. I'd say that's leaps and bounds from where we used to be.
Yeah, that's a big step.
So that is nothing small to talk about.
Nice to have money.
With that, I'll call for this meeting to be adjourned and thank everybody for their participation and being here.